Now, when it comes to making these Skylanders videos, I've kind of begun to realize that there are going to be Skylanders that I'll never be able to really cover through the normal means. As I said before, I love to group up Skylanders around a certain topic, but when it comes to a lot of the cores from different games, a lot of them just won't be able to fit into a video type like that. Either because I already covered that topic and there isn't enough Skylanders to do it for, or it's because that Skylander doesn't really have a theme going on with them, which means I either have to toss them into an element video or just chalk them up as a loss to deal with later. And for the latter specifically, I could name 2 Skylanders off the top of my head who've had this happen to them. Batspin and Slam Bam, as these 2 were meant to be in their own videos on specific topics, but due to the themes of their videos, they had to be tossed. And then I realized I could just talk about the cores on their own and separate them between games, and I thought it would be best to start out with the cores from Swat Force. Now, in my personal opinion, I think that some of the most unique and visually pleasing cores came from Skylanders Swat Force, but that may be my bias showing. But funnily enough, there were literally 3 left. The exact number of Skylanders I work with literally all of the time. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the last core members from Skylanders SWAT Force. So with that out the way, let's get started.
Straight to the point.
Now, when it comes to Skylanders, Thorn is actually one that I've had fond memories of since he was actually one of the first Skylanders I bought after getting Skylanders SWAT Force, and I actually used to main him specifically before I got more Skylanders, as I really just liked his gameplay style when I was little, and even now I like him. And interestingly enough, he has some pretty interesting concept art to talk about. The only real difference he has in his concept art is that it looks like he has way more thorns, and I used to have a massive tail with an anchor-shaped end, or just an anchor attached to it outright that holds him down whenever he puffs up. And that makes me question how that would have worked gameplay-wise, and if it was changed because of that. But with that out the way, let's jump into his backstory and see what we can dig up. Now, to my surprise, Thorn actually isn't a dragon like I thought he was a long time ago. In actuality, he's a creature known as a Pufferthorn, which are regarded to be one of the cutest creatures in all of Skylands. Pufferthorns were known to be rather timid, and whenever they got scared, they would puff up their sharp spines as a defense whenever they were startled. And because of this, they would have a rather unfortunate history with giant trolls. Due to the spikiness of their spines, they would be used as makeshift living combs by giant trolls everywhere, since their spines were perfect for getting tangles out of their long nappy hair. And this has been happening for generations on generations. This is where Thorn comes into the picture, as he absolutely hated this and decided to take a stand against the trolls, using his natural abilities to fight back in a revolt alongside his fellow Pufferthorns. And soon after their hard-fought battle for their freedom, Eon would learn about his actions, and soon he would be recruited into and become a Skylander. Now, if I had a nickel every time a Skylander led a revolt against their oppressors, I would have 2 nickels. But what's really weird is that they both aren't really explained as well as they could have been. And the reason why is because I had to look through a bunch of different sources just to figure out what exactly happened. The main story kind of implies that Thorn fought off the entire army by himself, but when you go to other sources like the universe books, it states that he led a revolt, but it just says that and doesn't go too deep into it. But it does make me wonder why all trolls gave up on combing their hair. I mean, it could still be talking about the giant trolls, but it doesn't specify that. But I do see it as kind of funny that Thorn is responsible for why an entire race does not comb their hair. And now that I think about it, I wonder if that's the reason why most of the trolls that we see are bald. I mean, there's a lot of big holes in this, like Boomer, since he has a beard, and this theory is probably wrong, but it would be really funny if Thorn is the sole reason on why trolls don't have hair because they can't comb it. But with that out the way, let's get into the next Skylander of today. Now, when it comes to Skylanders within the tech element, I'm pretty sure that most people probably aren't going to think of Countdown as the first Skylander. But what's interesting about him, to me at least, is how he seemed to have gotten a lot of love for the short time we had with him. He not only got a light core variant, which is one of the other 8 that this game got, but he also got another variant called Kickoff Countdown, which basically turns him into a soccer ball. And speaking of his looks, let's take a stroll down development lane because there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, and a couple of funny things that happened during it. Now, not only does Countdown look absolutely deranged in most, if not all, of these concept arts, but there was one point in time where he had a downright game-breaking bug that involved his head specifically. Now, we all know about one of his moves that basically allows him to throw his head, but what most of us don't know is that during his production, you could actually stand on it and basically skip over portions of the level. Now, I'm not exactly sure what exactly he could jump over, but it's pretty likely that he could jump over battle gates since it's described as progression gates. But with that out the way, let's actually jump into his backstory and see what's going on with him. Countdown's story, interestingly enough, doesn't start out with him, but instead, it starts out with a group of Yetis, who were snowboarding together on a particularly chilly morning before they came across a massive bomb encased in ice. And after bringing it back to their cabin and defrosting it for some reason, they would be completely shocked when Countdown suddenly came to life. Strangely enough, Countdown has absolutely no memory on where he came from, or how he even ended up in the mountains in the first place. And through a series of events that I cannot find anywhere, he would somehow get his way into the Skylanders. When Countdown became a member of the Skylanders, Master Eon would begin to work with him on trying to patch his memories back together. But the two would run into a major problem. Every time he exploded, he would lose some of his memory. And to compound on this problem, he explodes a lot. Even though he has this drawback and they haven't pieced his past back together yet, he has always enjoyed working with Eon and fighting alongside his fellow Skylanders, even though he occasionally forgets what he's doing sometimes. Now, this backstory is actually really interesting to me due to the fact that we don't really have any solid evidence on how he got up into the mountains or who even made him in the first place. But weirdly enough, when I was younger, I actually thought he and Windup were connected somehow. Now, at first, this sounds like it's absolutely ludicrous, but you have to admit that these two have some similarities between each other. They not only have a similar build, but their colors are somewhat the same as well in the splash art, to the point that they look like they share the same style. It isn't that far-fetched to say that he might have been built by the toy maker who built Windup, but the only real issue I'm finding is why he would make and then subsequently abandon Countdown in the middle of nowhere, which is once again all speculation. But with that out the way, let's get into the last Skylander of today.
Slobber and slobber!
Now, when it comes to Skylanders from Swat, I think Slobber Tooth has a rather interesting reputation amongst the community. And by interesting, I mean that I have no idea what anyone really thinks about him. I don't know why, but a lot of people seem to hate him because of how he plays. And I can't really talk about his gameplay since, well, I don't own him, but what I can talk about is his development. Now, interestingly enough, Slobber Tooth was supposed to be a magic element Skylander, and I know that most of you are wondering how, and that's because he was supposed to be this thing. But over time, he would morph into what we know today, finally becoming the Slobber Tooth we know now once they merged the heads. But with that said and done, let's take a look at his backstory and see what we can talk about. Before he was a Skylander, Slobber Tooth was an ancient creature that had slumbered for thousands of years, and the only reason why he woke up is because two volcanic islands literally crashed into each other and erupted at the same time. Strangely enough, the moment he woke up, he was sought out by Chaos, and once Chaos found him, he offered the dinosaur turtle great power if he became one of his minions. Even though Slobber Tooth saw the benefits of this deal, he decided that he'd rather follow his own path instead, and for obvious reasons, Chaos did not like this outcome. So in a fit of rage, Chaos attacked his ancient and petrified homeland. Knowing that the rest of his species were still hibernating, Slobber Tooth fought tooth and nail against Chaos and his minions, and eventually drove him and his forces away. And for his heroism, Eon would seek him out and ask him to become a Skylander, and Slobber Tooth agreed to this deal, joining so he could defend Skylands from Chaos, and he would eventually make an appearance and trigger Happy targets the evil Chaos. Now, what I find interesting about this story is that Chaos sought him out to be one of his minions. So that makes me wonder what made Slobber Tooth stand out to Chaos so much. I mean, yeah, his species could be renowned within Skylands like a lot of the others, but I don't really see any reasons on why Chaos would try to recruit just one. I mean, he could have been trying to recruit him because Slobber Tooth doesn't really know about Chaos at all, but Slobber Tooth is just one guy. But he was able to send Chaos and his forces packing, so he would have been one hell of a good ally. But with that out the way, I'd like to thank you all for watching. But before you go, I'd like to inform you all that there might not be a video on Friday because, well, testing is coming up, and since one of them is an advanced placement test, I need to study as much as I can. But once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy videos like this, share this around so I can grow the channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, check out the playlist for Return to Skylands, it's Discord if you want to help, and the lore I've covered so far down in the description below, along with the music, and I will see you all in the next one.